Once again, good morning. We're picking up with chapter 9, lesson 8, question 2. And I looked at that Jeremiah 44:19 where it says there, can't remember what it says, but I pointed out that they were saying that they did this with their husband's permission, but Steve was kind of questioning that. And I was so busy, I didn't have my reading glasses, so I was so busy trying to figure out the verse, I forgot that basically it's in the form of a question where she says here, was it without our husbands that we made? And my understanding of that, and literally every commentator's comments on that, is that this is a rhetorical question. We did this with our husband's permission. And so the point was that Jeremiah should be addressing their husbands, not them, because if there's a problem, it should be with them. But anyway, so there's that. So we're looking at question 2 on chapter 9, lesson 8. I really hope to get some significant distance into chapter 10 as well. Trying to cut down on my notes because we need to pick up the pace a bit. All right. So question 2, chapter 9, lesson 8. As a consequence of their forsaking their Lord, their lives will not be good. There will be a lack of food, their sacrifice will not be accepted, and slavery will be in their future. Yet, why, from verse 4, will their bread be for them alone? This is chapter 9 in verse 4. He says their bread will be for them alone, for themselves alone. Why is that? I mean, what's his point?
It says that their bread will be for their own life, and so that gives me the indication that the bread that they were talking about and the way they were looking at their bread was not as an offering, but as for their own physical nourishment rather than spiritual growth. Okay.
Anything else on that?
The same thing. Their days of feasting and sacrifice would be missed while they were in captivity.
Okay. Anything else? So we look at it, it is also described as mourner's bread. And this type of bread, this is something that would never be considered as a sacrifice unto God. So an extension of what was said is that he's saying it would be for them alone. It would not be fit or accepted as a sacrifice unto God. Because there were certain grain offerings that we can read about in the book of Leviticus. So it's for them alone. None of it would be accepted as a sacrifice unto God. It is similar, I believe. Bear with me a little bit. To this statement here in Matthew chapter 7, verse 23. They may go about and offer this bread. They may offer it on an altar, and they may offer it as a sacrifice. But it's just like in Matthew chapter 7, 21 through 23. Remember, those are the fellows who said, Lord, Lord, did we not do this? Did we not do that? And so forth and so on. And then this was his answer. And then I declare unto them, I never knew you. Depart from me, you who practice lawlessness. So even though they may offer bread, it would not be accepted because they existing in a state of lawlessness in regard to God. Any other comments? So this is always the curse. I think here in chapter 9 in verse 4, but also Matthew 7 verse 23, this is always the curse of those who believe that there is inherent merit in a deed done, regardless of one's intentions or reasons behind it. No, it is very important that it be done in the right spirit, the spirit of serving God, the spirit of glorifying and honoring God. These people here in Matthew 7 and the people in Hosea 9 were not honoring God in anything that they did, even though they would look upon it as, Lord, Lord, did we not do thus, thus, and thus? And remember from a previous study, their offerings were not where W-H-E-R-E, the Lord had designated in Jerusalem. And even so today, any supposed service unto God that is not done in Christ, that's where we are to serve God today, is not going to be accepted. That is the place or in the person in whom we are to offer our service unto God. So any other comments onto this? So their deeds were for themselves alone, not for service unto God. All right, so then we go into verse 6 of chapter 9 again, and he just talks there about destruction, he talks about slavery, he talks about loss, the days of retribution have come, and then what is it said of their prophets and of their inspired men?
Some of the versions talk about him. The prophet was a fool, the spiritual man was insane. The King James says mad. American Standard says he was, and the New National Version says a maniac.
Okay.
They, you think, I look at that as that nobody that knows Jehovah God is going to follow those people. Now, there's a lot of people that claim to be religious people that follow people that I would consider those terms maybe maximum because they don't follow the Word of God.
Okay. Anyone else on that? And the New American Standard says that the prophet is a fool. And then it says that their inspired men are, it uses the word demented, which is the same thing there. So there's different words that can be used that say the same thing. So why would their prophets be fools? And that can be the same situation today, but why would a prophet be a fool?
He's not listening to God.
He's claiming to speak on God's behalf.
He's not listening to his word.
So he's not listening to the word of God, but he's claiming that he is speaking the word of God. Then carry that on out. Why is that a foolish act?
Because of the consequences that will come from not following God.
Okay?
They're going to have. He's supposed to be leading the people toward God. He's not. They are not.
And by speaking the word of God. And so we go back to that statement we had some time ago, is that they're listening to the commandments of men, which is the same statement that is repeated in the New Testament. These men are coming along claiming to be prophets, claiming to be speaking on God's behalf. They are not. And they are fooling and deceiving the people who are following them. Any advantage that they gain is going to be temporary. I don't care how long it lasts. It's going to be temporary. And then their followers who listen to them, their followers who accept them as prophets of God, their confidence is also going to be temporary. Imagine the judgment day when people are standing before God and they've been following today or back then false prophets, and they accepted their message. And then they find out in the judgment day that they were following and teaching the commandments of men and not of God. And instead of checking the word, they blithely accept whatever they are told. And that's true of today. We have to avoid that being true of this congregation. We need to check everything that is said with the scriptures, or we're going to follow into this same class. And so not only are the prophets fools, and that they're thinking they're gaining some advantage, but it's only temporary, but the listeners are also fools because they're not checking what these prophets are saying. Is it coming to pass? Comments? All right, so, and then it says the inspired man is demented, mad, insane. some such thing as that. Why? The prophets are fools because they falsely claim to speak on God's behalf, and not only are they misleading the people, but they are going to answer for it themselves. But now, why would he describe them as demented or mad or insane?
They speak the truth, and sometimes that's unpleasant. People reject it.
Okay, that could be. I'm looking at this again as false teachers, but I see where you're coming from on that.
I mean, because Jesus was thought to be mad. Festus called Paul, said, much learning made you mad.
Okay.
So I think that there's something to some people rejecting.
That would be one approach to this. I simply took a different approach, that the idea that they are demented, in as much as what is impending is slavery. What is impending is destruction. What is impending is loss. And yet some of these people claiming inspiration are encouraging them to rejoice. Look at the prosperity that we have because we are following, the Queen of Heaven, probably Ashtaroth. And we're enjoying all this prosperity because of our idols. What was just a few years ahead of this time? What was going to happen? Captivity, slavery. So that's the approach that I took on this. They're preaching rejoice. They're preaching prosperity. They're preaching, look at what our idols have done for us. And in a short period of time, it's all going to be lost. In fact, we'll talk about this more in just a little bit. I'm having some issues with allergies, and so this eye here is weeping a bit, just a bit. And so this is exactly, this up here is that what they were accusing Jesus of in John 10, verse 20. Many of them are saying, he has a demon and he is insane. Why are you listening to him? What was he claiming? This is going to require some previous knowledge, but what was Jesus claiming that they were accusing him of being insane? There's really three points. One thing he was claiming is he says, they're out to kill me. And they said, well, you're standing right here in public. They're not out to kill you. You're insane. What happened? They killed him. So he also claimed that he would raise again on the third day, and they mocked him for that. What happened? He was raised on the third day. He also claimed that there was going to be a time when in the temple there was not going to be one stone still standing upon another. What happened? It was all destroyed. So you see, he made these claims, and they claimed that he was insane. Contrary to the false prophets, as my understanding of chapter 9 here, he was a prophet of God. What he said did come about, but not with these people. They are insane. But Eddie made a good point in that the Lord identifies false prophets as being maniacs, but the world identifies teachers of truth as being maniacs and insane. Any other comments on this? Now, a lot of times the false teachers today are not necessarily making future prophecies, though some are. But what they are making is their claim to speak on the behalf of God, and we need to check that. We need to check that. Book, chapter, and verse is the idea here. Any other comments through question 3? All right, question 4. There was hostility, and they have gone deep into depravity. The Lord will remember their sins. Now I'm looking at verse 10. They were at this time compared to grapes and figs. Why are they compared to grapes and figs in that context of verse 10? Tony?
God was looking for good fruits, but they proved that they weren't good fruits because they had turned, they had turned to Baal fuel. And then if you look in Numbers 25 and make a reference there they had joined themselves to the Moabite women, were having sexual relations with them, and one man was so brazen that he even brought her into the camp, and Phinehas thrust them through with a sword and stopped the plague. There were 24,000 killed in that. That was, I guess, result of his sin or their sins and turning to Baal field.
Other comments? The way you look at this verse depends on what time frame the Lord is speaking of. If he's speaking of right then, as of Hosea chapter 9, then of course this would not be a good commentary. But what's that first phrase, verse 10, the way it begins? So I would like you to suggest here, I'd like you to think about the possibility that he's not talking about as Israel is right now, but when he first approached them. And then that changes the scene entirely, because right now they are a fruit that is of no use. They are a fruit that is actually rotten and corrupt. But if you think about it from the beginning, it was not so. In fact, we have a couple of other verses. Exodus 19, verse 8, all the people answered and said together, all that the Lord has spoken we will do. And Moses brought back the words of the people to the Lord, Exodus 24. Then Moses came and recounted to the people all the words of the Lord and all the ordinances. And all the people answered with one voice and said, all the words of the Lord which we have spoken we will do. Now compare that with verse 10. I found Israel like grapes in the wilderness. So it's possible that he's referring back to that time when they had a favorable relationship. And if you're a traveler and you're out in the wilderness and you come across some ripe grapes, it's going to be quite refreshing. Same thing with figs. In fact, the first fruits of the figs. So I believe that here the Lord is referring back to their beginnings. But then if you look at it as right now, well, then this is not going to be a very positive context here. Comments? So one of the things, oh good, that's bigger than on my screen, it's pretty small here. So one of the lessons that we come across here, I mean, if how I understand verse 10 is correct, that he's looking back to the time when they had this good, healthy relationship, and he is comparing them to figs in the wilderness that would be refreshing, then what we are talking about is a major idea of great importance, and that is looking at the beginning of a thing, but then seeing the end of a thing. And so at the beginning, they had a very good relationship with God. We will do all that the Lord has commanded us. But then the end of the thing we see in these minor prophets. The application for us, just talking about the Lord's delight. The Lord your God is in your midst, a victorious warrior. He will exalt over you with joy. He will be quiet in his love. He will rejoice over you with shouts of joy. So as we're reading about Israel and somewhat of Judah in these minor prophets, well, in some of the books about Judah and these minor prophets, this joy is not there any longer. This rejoicing is no longer there. And so we begin to get into ideas such as Galatians 5, 7 through 9. You were running well. So they had a good beginning. You were running well. Who has hindered you from obeying the truth? This persuasion did not come from him who calls you. And then a little leaven leavens the whole lump. In fact, It was just, I think Wednesday I was referencing Galatians, and then Eddie referenced Galatians as well. And they were an area of churches that were on the brink of apostasy. They were on the brink of no longer being identified as churches of Christ because of the false doctrine they were going after. You were running well. Who hindered you? Well, this whole doctrine about false teachings and prophets who are fools and inspired people who claim inspiration who are insane, they'd come into the churches and had taught false doctrines, and they were, again, on the brink of becoming apostates. But the one who endures to the end, he will be saved. And so there we have that lesson on let's begin well. And you can see that, I mean, immediately applied to this congregation. This congregation that meets in this building has not been here all that long. And people have commended us for the beginning of this work. Well, that's great. That's fantastic. But what about the end of it? But then we look at our individual lives. We don't want it to say, you know, you were baptized, you were zealous of the Lord, you endeavored to increase your knowledge, you began to run so well. And we don't want to have the Lord then ask, what happened? We want to end well, not just begin well. In PE and teaching first grade, there'd be a fence maybe 50 yards away. And I'd tell my little first graders, now don't, I want you to run to that fence and back at the end of PE. And I said, now don't run all out because you'll exhaust yourself. And you know they didn't listen. They ran all out, and about halfway there, they were falling down on the ground, couldn't run anymore. And the ones who paced themselves, they made it to the end. And that just happened to occur to me there. But the one who endures to the end, he will be saved. Look at the good beginning of Israel, the 12 tribes. And now look at the minor prophets. That is a pattern we do not want to replicate. Not as a congregation, and certainly not as individuals here. Comments? So I have said everything there is to say about that. Wow, I'm good. All right, something to think about. So question 5, thought question. Ephraim's, and remember, I really believe Ephraim is representative of the 10 tribes. Ephraim's glory will depart, and they will be severely punished. They will have children only to see them slaughtered. And then verse 14, so we're in chapter 10 and verse 14. And I think 15 is what I meant there. So I hope you read to the next verse. And then in 15 mentions Gilgal, and that's where God's hatred began. All their evil is at Gilgal. Indeed, I came to hate them there. And the thought question is, why? I mean, we kind of need to know why his hatred of Israel, the 10 tribes, began at Gilgal. That's important information. What's your answer?
That was the center of false worship where they asked for a king to be like the other nations.
Okay.
And they rejected God.
Anyone else?
There's also a camp where they set up the memorial stones there as they crossed Jordan. And so that is in contrast to Patty's comment, which is accurate also, that here, as they came across the Jordan, they put up those memorial stones, and the reason for that was when your children asked what this was, this is the holy place.
Right.
This is where God was with us and God delivered us, and we crossed the Jordan on dry ground. And then later on, they come to the same place, and now they're asking for a king, what God's plan was to ensue.
Okay. And rejecting the the rule of God. And he told the prophet, he says, they're not rejecting you, they're rejecting me. And as was also said, this became a prominent place and center of idolatry as well. So that's its history, and then here is a current. And one of the problems is there seems to have been 4 or 5 different Gilgals. But when you trace it back, we come up with reasons as to why his hatred of Israel, that's such a strong word, his hatred of Israel is began there. And you notice he says he will, I will drive them out of my house. And just, you might want to go back to the very beginning of this book, where Hosea was instructed to marry a prostitute. And then we see the end of that, where she is divorced, and it was so representative of God divorcing Israel because of Israel's unfaithfulness to him. Comments? All right, I'm looking at then in number 6. In verse 17, what forecast is made concerning Israel? So now we're looking at the end of chapter 9. What forecast is made concerning Israel? Nothing new here, but...
I will cast them away.
All right? I will cast them away. My God will cast them away. Comments?
He's going to reject them like they rejected him.
Okay. So this is really the secondary action. I will cast them away is not the initial action. The initial action is the next phrase there that he says there, because they have not listened to him. My God will cast them away because they have not listened to him. That exact phrase is applicable to today with absolutely no alteration. Now, listening to him from the standpoint of the new covenant, we're under a new covenant, but the principle is actually literally the same. He will cast us away if we do not listen to him. And what else? He says something else there.
They'll be wanderers among the other nations.
So those two things. I will cast them away because they are not, or my God will cast them away because they are not listening to his word, and they will be wanderers among the other nations. What is this referencing? The dispersion, the captivity, and so forth. And so there's that consequence. And if you look into the New Testament, basically the concept of hell is exactly the same notion. Depart from me, ye that work iniquity. And those who don't obey the gospel are cast away. So this imagery that we see here, and this actual history of both the 10 tribes and then the 2 tribes, and God's rejection of them, is just a warm-up example for us to understand that if we reject him, if we worship anything before him, including ourselves, by the way, then we will be cast off. And why would they be wanderers? But then I want to ask the question from the standpoint of why are people wanderers today?
They don't have a leader. If
All right.
they're not listening to him, they don't have a leader.
All right?
They're lost. They're just lost.
And then the same thing as to why they're lost, why they're leaderless, is Christ, he came to open their eyes so that they may turn from darkness to light and from dominion of Satan to God, that they may receive the forgiveness of sins and an inheritance among those who have been sanctified by faith in me. So those answers that were given are absolutely valid, but another way to answer that is they were in darkness. And their crime is that God had elected them for the law, for revelation, for the prophets, and they rejected all of that. And so they would become wanderers. Tony?
One other point that comes to my mind is that they've become totally useless to God. Anything that's worth anything to us, we try to hold on to it and maybe sell it to somebody else or do something with it. But when something is totally useless, we just throw it out like garbage.
Right. Okay. I know we've offered this so much, but we just have to understand again, all of this is written for our learning and our admonition. And when we even read that phrase that the law is our schoolmaster to bring us to Christ, and we look at that and say, oh, he's talking about the prophecies. Well, certainly he is. But he's also talking about all of these principles. And one of the principles is that if we don't listen to him, he will reject us. And we will wander in darkness, spiritual darkness. As sometimes this gets kind of tedious because it is seemingly redundant. But redundancy is when a thing is repeated unnecessarily. This is not unnecessarily repeated. We are being warned and warned and warned and warned so that we don't make the mistakes they make. All right, well then, let's go into Lesson 9, Chapter 10. And I may have been referencing Chapter 10, but we were in Chapter 9. Let me catch up with myself here. All right, so looking at Chapter 10 and verse 1, would somebody go ahead and read Chapter 10 and verse 1 because of the nature of the question?
Israel is a luxuriant vine. He produces fruit for himself. The more his fruit, the more altars he made. The richer his land, the better he made the memorial stones.
All right, so I ask you, do you perceive one of these expressions as being a key expression in this verse? If so, you know, not only what is the phrase, but what is your justification for it? Why?
He produces fruit for himself. He's not doing anything for God. It's selfish. It's for him.
Okay. That would absolutely be one. And this would, what I understand, would refer back to No, I'm not going to see it. The mourner's bread. Oh yeah. Their sacrifices will not please him. Their bread will be like mourner's bread, for their bread will be for themselves alone. And so that seems to be a repetition of that particular phrase. Did anybody pick out any other phrase here? All right, so if you picked out the first phrase, Israel is a luxuriant vine, they were one commentator, I'm just going to quote, they were temporarily fruitful but void of any good offering towards God. So that might be a commentary on the first phrase. He produces fruit for himself, and nothing is offered unto God. That's just an ongoing theme throughout this whole study here. Israel may have offered, but it was not accepted because it was not offered in his service. The more the fruit, then what did he do? What did Israel do? The more that was produced.
It says the more altars he made.
And so what is he doing there? The more he produced, the more altars he made.
More sacrifice.
More sacrifices. And he's they're attributing their prosperity back to the idols. Remember, we've looked at this. They have forgotten that God is the source of their prosperity. And part of the problem is they had left God, but they continued to prosper. And God doesn't do things in our time. And so they begin to think, well, then it's these idols that are giving us this prosperity. And so as they prospered, they would build more idols. And then the richer the richer his land, then what?
The better he made memorial stones.
The better he made memorial stones. New American Standard says pillars. Basically, it's anything set in place. So it's probably just a repetition of the idea of idolatries and idols. So as he prospered, as things went well, he just got more and more into this. These idols are what is giving us our prosperity and our wealth instead of attributing it to God. A lot of nations do this. They begin to grow wealthy and they begin to look inward into themselves. Look at what we have done. Look at what we have accomplished. Our prosperity is based upon our efforts. God is forgotten. And then that nation passes away into the dust pile of history. So the more they poured into idolatry. Now, I want to just read verses 2. Any comments on verse 1? So again, they're just attributing their prosperity to the wrong sources. I just want to read verses 2, 3. You know what? Somebody else read verses 2 and 3 and 4. I just don't want to skip that, but I don't have questions about it.
Their heart is false. Now they must bear their guilt. The Lord will break down their altars and destroy their pillars. For now they will say, we have no king, for we do not fear the Lord. And a king, what could he do for us? They utter mere words with empty oaths. They make covenants, so judgment springs up like poisonous weeds in the furrows of the field.
All right, so that kind of follows right after verse 1, attributing their prosperity to the wrong source. All right, question 2 then. They are a faithless people. They reject God's overrule because he is without ability, so they think, so they claim. Their oaths and their judgments are worthless, which we've just read. The idolatrous priest will cry over it. Verse 5, what will they cry over and why? So we don't have the prophets that are fools, and we don't have the inspired men that are insane, but now we have priests. What will they cry over and why?
I'm not sure if I'm right, but I put they would cry over the calves, the idols that they have made, because the idols cannot defend them. The idols are not protecting them now.
Okay, and there's maybe one more phrase that could be added to that from verse 5. I mean, what she said was exactly right. They're crying over the idols. They're no longer protecting them, but as a manifestation of this lack of protection, what is seen or what is evidenced, what is done?
No more glory.
Pardon?
No more glory.
No more glory, because it has left. Comments on that? All right, I think you can very much see, I mean literally, they have poured all of their praise into these idols. They attribute all of their prosperity to these idols. All of the wealth that they have gained is to these idols. All of their success as a nation to these idols. And now what is Assyria doing with this quote-unquote golden calf?
Send it to King Terror in verse 6 as a tribute. And Hosea talks about that again earlier in verse 5 and 13. That the Assyrian king. And so
It's left. everything that they attributed to these idols, and now Assyria is just carrying it away. I mean, that imagery, I hope you can see that in your mind, because that is so incredibly powerful. The things that they trusted the most, Assyria is just carrying away. And we have to learn from that. We have to learn from that. All of the things that we think we are, all of the things that we think we trust and rely upon, if they're of this world, they can be carried away, and they will be carried away. And I want you to compare this idea of an idol that can be picked up literally and carried away, and then the Lord our God, who cannot be carried away, because he's spiritual, and the fact that he is all-powerful as well. I just wanted to compare it to this fellow here that we are so familiar with. And I will say to my soul, soul, you have many goods laid up for the many years to come. Take your ease, eat, drink, and be merry. Do you see how absolutely self-centered he is? His whole life has been spent preparing for him. And you can even see this fellow thinking, man, I have planned for the future. I have planned for the future. I'm a far-seeing fellow. But God said to him, you fool, this very night your soul is required of you. And he didn't plan quite far enough in the future. Comments, and then I think we'll be through with the class. Just this one last comment. As they're watching this idol, or maybe it's been broken into pieces, being carried away into Assyria, and they're being carried away into Assyria, they had to have realized, and I think this is an important point, the very thing that they have been trusting is what has caused them to be carried away. They're trusting in idols and rejecting God, and that is the very thing that is causing them to go into slavery and poverty. Comments? Appreciate your comments. We'll pick up with question 3 on lesson 9.